Before you even consider doing private practice, what I would suggest, there are so many private practices that open up and fail. The sooner that you start saving towards your retirement, the better. It really depends on what state you're in, right? So Massachusetts, we finally got complete independence. So the way it works in Massachusetts right now is you have to have had 2 years under an MD supervised and 1 year of independent practice, and then you're considered completely independent. But it varies a lot, not just by state, but by specialty. Even if all NPs, regardless of your specialty, can practice independently, meaning without a legal collaborating physician agreement, it's not really realistic or feasible for certain specialties to do that.
How is it like in psychiatry?
So I think psychiatry is one of the only areas. It's definitely a unique specialty. You could feasibly sort of be completely independent and do everything that a psychiatrist or psychiatry would need or do. For example, if you're doing primary care, you really need like the setup of a primary care office, right? You could start a practice, hire a team in primary care or something like that. That would be a lot of startup cost, right? Because you need a ton of equipment, you need the right kind of space, you need the right kind of furniture, versus again, with psychiatry, you don't need a lot of equipment and you really just need kind of like a private space to get started. So it's very low cost startup. So if you don't have a lot of capital to begin with, it's going to be really hard to start like a private practice in certain specialties.
Do banks lend on, like, how does financing work and owning your own practice and starting one?
So I didn't have to finance anything. Again, you need to yeah. So I started completely, I did everything on my own. Okay. And so, like the startup cost was low and I just kind of like, as I made money, I expanded, right? So now I have a huge clinic where we have like 8 offices. I have a reception area. We have a yoga studio. I have like 5 clinical staff. I have 2 admin staff, but that took some years, yeah. Right? So in the beginning, I was able to just like work on my own and build up capital. Then I could hire people, get a certain kind of a space. It's a lot of work. So you have to know what your state regulations are. You have to be business minded, right? So that's something to consider when you start your own practice. You're not just clinician anymore. You might be manager, you might be human resources, you might be billing, you might be, you're the business end of things, everything. And you could hire out for those things too. But again, that takes time and money. So if you're fortunate and you just have a lot of money and you can hire people right off the bat and pay for all your equipment, that's great. But that wasn't my situation.
When you started, like, what is a ballpark of money that you need?
That's really hard to put into words. It's easier for me to say that once I had a panel of 50 patients, I felt like I was making a decent salary, like at least what I was making when I was employed somewhere else.
So it takes time for you to get there.
Yeah, I really didn't have much overhead. I think I was paying $1,000 or less a month at the time for like a little kind of office space. The rent was cheap and was paying at the time, I think like $200 or $300 a month for my EHR. And that's really it. I didn't have any staff. I did all my billing on my own. So I actually spent a couple months like teaching myself billing, because it's very different. That whole managed care system, that's what's very different in Korea versus here in the States. Billing is very complex. I spent a good amount of time before really getting into my practice, just teaching myself billing. But the thing I want to say before any of this really too is, before you even consider doing private practice, what I would suggest, especially if you're like a newer nurse, just getting really good at your own basic clinical day-to-day skills in this type of setting that you want to work in, and spend some years just like doing that, right? Because then at least you won't have to worry about the clinical stuff, right? That needs to be like solid before you even consider doing your own private practice. There are so many private practices that open up and fail because people either, 1, are incompetent, or 2, they're not business-minded people, so they don't know how to run a business. Those are the 2 primary reasons why I see a lot of clinics fail when you're trying to do private practice.
Just why did you start your own? What was your motivation?
That's a great question. And again, it has a lot to do with like how healthcare works in America, right? When I went to grad school and before grad school, I had a certain idea of like how I wanted to practice. And it's been very difficult to practice in that way, according to my own vision and value system. Most of healthcare in America, not just mental health, is tertiary intervention, aka sick care. It's not a lot of preventative care. I wanted to do a lot more of that and a lot more mind, body, and holistic work, which you can't do if you just, get a job somewhere as an NP, right? They want you to just see patients all day long. I'm a certified yoga instructor as well. And so I can do that. Like I can't work somewhere and get paid to do yoga therapy with people, right? We have a yoga studio. We do mind body work. We do like acupressure. We do massage therapy. And we do traditional psychiatric medicine and traditional one-to-one therapy. And we do a lot of groups and things like that. And that would be the reason why I started my own practice. And I can do sort of all of that.
You mentioned the healthcare in the US is focused on tertiary care, not preventative care. Could you expand more on that?
It's universal healthcare, right? In Korea.
It is.
Basically, this country makes a huge profit when people sort of maintain illness, because that's how, drug companies make money, keep buying medications, and our systems are so burdened right now. It was already that way, but it kind of exploded with the pandemic, especially primary care and hospitals. But the hospitals are still just a mess. There are pros and cons to our system, and there are pros and cons to the Korean healthcare system. I think I'm not saying it's completely bad and evil, but these are the problems that we have to deal with. Even as a person who has private practice, I still have to answer to drug companies, right? They still have a lot of power. I still have to get paid by insurance companies because I do take insurance. I do take self-pay patients. Usually those are folks who are wealthy or really insist on coming to see us. And so we do, but that's certainly like a small percentage of the patients that we see. And so even with all the freedoms that I have, running my own clinic, there's still that burden. I want to prescribe a specific type of medication, let's say, for a patient, and it's really hard to get. And they make you try other medications that you don't want to, or they make you jump through hoops, to get that particular treatment for the patient that they really should be getting right off the bat. And sometimes I can't even get it, no matter how hard I try. And then it puts the responsibility on the patient to pay for the service. And then that impacts our relationship with the patient because we have to collect those funds. So like I have to pay my staff, right? And then the patient's kind of upset with us. So those are some like specific examples of how that managed care system negatively impacts patient care. And that's not an issue in Korea, right? So much.
I'm not sure completely because I'll need to talk to a physician to, ask this kind of question. Because in Korea, it has been an issue to really having that role of, they call it physician's assistant mostly. There's no national licensure exam. So they're not accepted legally in Korea.
But in reality, they do a lot.
If they're not enough prescribers and providers who can see patients at a timely manner. So you touched on, having that solid foundation of clinical skills. Who do you think makes a good psych NP?
I think you have to have the personality for it, number one. You have to enjoy that type of work long term.
What do you mean by that?
Working with mentally ill folks. That can be really emotionally exhausting. And if you don't have good self-care, if you don't have good boundaries, get some experience. That's the only way, right? Work a year or two with mental health patients somehow and see if you enjoy that. And you can do that day to day. I think you have to be really picky about which program you do to get your licensure, because not all programs are created equal. That's another problem in America, right? All schools are private. They're all business entities. So you really have to pick a good program. And it's not so much about the actual courses or the education, but it's about how the program guides you. And it's about what kind of clinicals that they set you up with. A lot of schools don't even set you up with clinicals. You have to go find your own clinicals. And if you don't even know what you're doing, you don't even know how to find a good clinical. A lot of people get stuck in places where they just kind of get by, don't learn anything. And it's dangerous and you're more likely to get sued. That's another thing about America, right? People are very sue happy here. Liability is definitely a major concept here as an independent NP.
What was your pathway into psychiatry?
So I majored as an undergrad in psychology, and I worked exclusively in mental health, various things, research and clinical stuff. 5 years before I even went to grad school. I've always known that I wanted to do that. And then I, did the psych program at BC and went back to doing community mental health for a little bit after I graduated. Community mental health essentially is the bread and butter of psychiatry. I've worked in so many different kinds of settings, from inpatient to outpatient and everything in between.
What kind of patients do you see?
So as far as diagnostics, we see everything. But because we're outpatient, like my clinic, I screen out for certain things. So I screen out for, let's say, like severe dual diagnosis or a severe eating disorder, things that we can't really handle outpatient. Socioeconomically, our patient population is not that diverse because we don't take Medicare or Medicaid. It's important to me that my staff is diverse. So if you look on our website,
Yeah, I noticed that.
We have all kinds of people.
Do you think there is discrepancy when it comes to like financial status, who gets psychiatric services?
America is huge, right? And it's so different depending on what state you're in. Level of access to care could be so different, right? We're lucky here in Massachusetts. We have like state-of-the-art care. Even here, people have trouble getting access. We could be better about engaging certain cultures and populations in mental health services. Mental health is everywhere. Like, that's universal. That's part of the reason why I started my clinic too. Not everyone is interested in traditional psychiatric Western medicine. Mental health is so much more, in my opinion, than one-to-one therapy and psych meds. To do a better job of incorporating other types of treatments.
Your practice is called Kim Psychiatry and Holistic
Health Center.
What do you think holistic health means to you?
To me, holistic health means considering all the aspects of an individual's wellness. What's going on socially, what's going on environmentally, what's going on internally, physiologically, what's going on non-psychiatric medically. So really considering all the aspects of an individual's life that might contribute to their wellness or lack of.
What do you think is the most important in creating a team for your practice?
That's been an interesting journey for me to learn as an owner and a business person. One thing that I've learned is effective communication goes a long way in terms of the team dynamics. I personally interview and hire and train every single staff member myself, from clinicians to admin people. I really try to help produce a culture of good work-life balance, effective open communication, and I try to hire people that I think get along with the existing team dynamic. The other thing that I've become better at is identifying problematic employees faster, getting rid of that sooner rather than later. As a mental health clinician, I always want to help people, right? But when you're also trying to run an effective clinic, you have to be quick to identify people that are going to be problematic to that team.
I think getting rid of the people who are not necessary in the team, that takes courage and time, but that's very necessary.
It's important for people to want to come to work, feel good, feel motivated, are happy with what they do, love the team. That is the most important thing to me. Because whenever I do make a decision about a hire or a new, policy that we're going to implement or some new type of service we're going to offer, the first question I always try to ask myself is how is this going to impact patient care? When I'm having a tough time making a decision, I always remember that question, and it really helps. If you lead with that, then I think you're going to make the right decision. Back when I was a newer NP, I had a really great mentor. He was a physician. We talked a few times about private practice, and he thought it was almost impossible to do private practice, meaning for profit, in an ethical way. And to a certain degree, I agree with that. And I get where he's coming from, but I think it depends on your personality. I think if you do lead with that question, how is this going to impact patient care? You'll be set up for better ethics. You have to have good mentors when you're first starting out. That's really how you learn. You need good guidance.
How did you find yours? How did you get connected with them?
Community mental health, if you want to do mental health, is always a good place to start in the nonprofit world. In that kind of position, you're going to make less money. You're going to work with other people who have also sort of are okay with that and believe in that type of work. And then when you're interviewing, ask questions. And if someone can't answer how much supervision you're going to get or who that, person is going to be to give you the good supervision, those are red flags, right? Being picky about the type of setting that you're going to work in.
What you mentioned about focusing on patient care, not the money or the business aspect of it, I think it's super important. Focusing on the core and why you're doing this.
Yeah. If you're going to be an NP in the States, you're going to make a good salary. So, especially in the beginning, don't be so nitpicky about, the exact dollar amount. Focus on getting good at your specialty. I can't stress how important that is.
I want to ask you, I think it's a good segue into parenting.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have children before you started your practice or no?
I started my private practice back in 2016 when I was still working somewhere else full time. So I'd started like the logistics, like the paperwork of registering for the state. And then I started seeing people private pay only, like 5 to 10 people. That's it for the first couple of years while still having a full-time job. That was before I had kids. And then I had Jack in 2018. I did go back to work full time for a little bit after that. But then I had Lyra in 2019, and I would fully immerse myself in the private practice. After I had Lyra, I want to say 3 to 6 months before I felt like financially comfortable again. So that's a huge question, right? Like, when is a good time to have kids? In my opinion, the answer is there's no good time to have kids. Some people have kids before, yeah, right? So I think it just, you have to figure out what's best for you as an individual. I will say this though, if I didn't have kids right now, I'd be 3 times as successful as I am. Like, it's going to impact your career, right? And if I were a white man on top of that, I'd be 5 times as successful. But
is it because of the time management?
We all have a finite amount of energy, right? And you don't want to overtax yourself. If you want to continue to be a good, effective parent and also have an effective career, to balance that is not easy. So I could work more, but then that would be at the detriment to my family and my kid. With intention, I don't work more. I've accepted, like, this is what I've chosen. This is what I want my life to be like. And things do get easier, like as your kids like enter the public school system, as they can like wipe their own butt, like that's a huge like change. I do think it's harder as you get older and your body ages, right?
Being in nursing, what is the work-life balance like?
It's a daily compromise. Especially if you have a family and you have kids, like things happen all the time. It's very important to accept that your plans will always be ruined and that's not a bad thing. I think accepting that can go a long way for stress management and building adaptability, right? Challenge yourself to become more adaptable. And a lot of boundaries, right? Boundaries with other people, boundaries with yourself, like self-care. If you're being too taxed, you're not going to be as effective in your work anyway. It is tough to work in healthcare. You have to figure out a way to make it sustainable. That's why nurses like just left. Mass exodus of the hospitals. The reason why I'm so busy, but I can do it and manage it is because I love what I do. Part of the reason why I love to do what I do is because I can do so many different things that I enjoy doing. It's not easy, right, to find that, but definitely worthwhile to, get to know yourself a bit. I mean, most human beings don't like what they do for money, right? Unfortunately.
As a mental health clinician, how do you take care of your mental health?
I'm very protective of my sleep. I have my kids on a good sleep schedule. I'm on a good sleep schedule. I believe in consistent mindful movement. We call it exercise here, right? But I hate that word because it's complicated. It has so much negative connotation to it. For simplicity's sake, I'll say like I exercise regularly. I meditate, try to eat healthy. I mean, I'm Korean, so I eat everything, right? I'm never going to go on a diet. But I focus a lot on like vegetables, right? We all know these things are good for you, right? It's just the basics. Going back to the basics. Get rid of toxic relationships in your life, even if they're family members.
If you have any advice for nurses, nurse practitioners in financial like investment or saving, what would you tell them?
I think the sooner that you start saving towards your retirement, the better. Like I wish I had started and learned about this like in my early 20s. The more you can save now for your retirement, that's just more security for you. The earlier that you can start saving for your kids too. Basic college education is obscenely expensive now. Try to spend less money early on. I know it's kind of a catch-22 because you do want to go to a good program and those are more expensive. But if you can find ways to save here and there, get a bunch of like scholarships or tuition reimbursement. There are a lot of programs here where like you work in a certain type of underserved setting and you can, for a few 2 or 3 years and you get all of your student loans paid off.
Do you know what those are called?
When you apply to those programs, they'll list it for you, what places qualify for loan reimbursement. It's usually a contract, like a 2 to 3 year contract that you decide to work there. And you also get paid a salary and they'll take care of all your loans at the end of it.
Jessica, if the audience wants to find your practice or you online, where can they do so?
Yeah, so they can look me up on our website. It's www.kimpsychiatricservices.com, or people can just email me, Jess Kim. That's JessJinkim @gmail.com.